What's up, Broncos country? Are you ready for what could happen in the next 3 weeks? Because the league's trade deadline is approaching and Denver's name is circulating in some serious conversations. 7 players, 7 possibilities. And one of them has a direct connection with Sean Payton that could change everything we're seeing on the field. Veteran linebacker, explosive tight ends, a wide receiver who could bring that spark the offense is missing. Will the front office pull the trigger? Or are we going to keep the roster as is and trust the process? Stick with me until the end because this could be the most important week of the season for our team's future. Look, Denver Broncos family, we're sitting at 4 wins and 2 losses. That puts the team in the fight, for real. We're not just competing, we're dominating in several phases of the game. The defense is suffocating opponents, the offense is finding its rhythm with Bo Nix evolving every week, and the fan base is believing again. But when you're in a competitive position like this, there's a burning question. Is the current roster enough to get us where we want to go? Or do we need reinforcements to maximize this window of opportunity? The trade deadline happens on November 4th, a Tuesday that could define the direction of several franchises. Competitive teams look at this date as a chance to fill holes, especially when injuries start appearing. And look, it's no secret to anyone that we've had some important losses recently. On the other hand, teams that aren't competing for anything start dismantling their roster, selling pieces in exchange for draft picks and assets to rebuild for the future. So analysts around the league started connecting dots, and 7 names appeared as possible targets for Denver. I'm going to go through each one of them, explain what they bring to the table, and most importantly, whether it makes sense for our team to go after these guys. Let's start with linebackers, because this position has been a topic of conversation since the beginning of the season. 3 names came up: Demario Davis of the Saints, Jordan Brooks of the Dolphins, and Jamal Adams of the Raiders. Demario Davis is the name that stands out most on this entire list. Why? Because he has a deep connection with Sean Payton. This veteran linebacker was signed by the Saints in 2018, precisely when Payton was there running the offense and building that competitive team we know. Since then, Davis has become a machine, 5 seasons being named All-Pro, 1 of them first team, and 2 Pro Bowl appearances. The guy is respected, he's a leader, he's smart on the field, reads plays before they happen. Imagine bringing a player of that caliber to our linebacker corps. It would be an instant injection of experience and tactical knowledge. But here comes the big, however. Davis is 36 years old. In professional football, especially for a linebacker who depends on speed and physical ability, that age weighs heavy. His impact would be limited by the remaining time in his career. And there's another crucial factor: Dre Greenlaw. Greenlaw was one of the off-season acquisitions, signing a 3-year contract with the team. He's recovering from a quadriceps injury that's kept him out since the beginning of the season, but he's eligible to return this week. That's right, family. Greenlaw could be back against the Giants. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he'll play in that game, because the medical staff and coaching staff will evaluate whether he's really ready. But the fact is, he's close to returning. If Greenlaw comes back healthy and can produce at the level we expect from him, does it still make sense to go after a 36-year-old veteran linebacker? Probably not, unless the Saints are willing to practically give Davis away for a very late draft pick. It's hard to justify giving up valuable capital for a player at the end of his career. Jordan Brooks of the Dolphins is younger, has more gas in the tank, but would also probably come with a higher cost. Brooks is solid, but doesn't have Davis's resume. As for Jamal Adams of the Raiders, well, let's talk about the Raiders in a bit because there's a special context there. Now, let's move to tight ends. 3 names appeared: Mark Andrews of the Ravens, David Njoku of the Browns, and Chigoziem Okonkwo of the Titans. Mark Andrews is one of the best tight ends in the league when he's healthy. The guy is a weapon in the passing game, has sure hands, knows how to find spaces in the zone, and is a reliable safety valve for any quarterback. David Njoku also has his qualities. He's athletic, can make plays after the catch, and would be an interesting addition to any offense. But here's the point. Finally, things started working with Evan Engram. Engram was signed in the offseason with a 2-year contract, and although the start was slow, the last 3 weeks showed exactly why the team believed in him. 13 receptions, 146 yards, and a touchdown. And that's just scratching the surface of what he can do. Bo Nix is developing chemistry with Engram. The trust between the two is growing every game, and interrupting that momentum to bring in another tight end might not make strategic sense. Unless Engram suffers some injury or one of these names is available for almost nothing, it's hard to see Denver making moves at this position. Chigoziem Okonkwo is the youngest on this tight end list, has developmental potential, but again, with Engram finding his rhythm, why mess with what's working? Now let's talk about wide receiver, and the name here is Jakobi Meyers of the Raiders. Meyers is an interesting player. He brings reliability, sure hands, can move the chains on third downs, and would be a solid addition to any receiver room. Denver's offense could use a bit more explosiveness and reliability at the position, especially considering we're still finding consistency in the passing game. But here comes the big obstacle. Meyers plays for the Raiders, and the Raiders are divisional rivals. Teams from the same division rarely make deals with each other because strengthening a direct rival can come back to haunt you twice per season, every year. Does it happen? Yes, occasionally. But it's rare. The Raiders would have to be desperate to get rid of Meyers, and even then, they'd probably avoid sending him to Denver. And on the other side, does Sean Payton want to help the Raiders by giving them assets in return? Probably not. Speaking of Adams, who's also with the Raiders, the same logic applies. Adams was an elite safety a few years ago, but switched to linebacker and has struggled. His value has dropped, and although he still has name recognition, he's not producing at the level we've seen from him. Again, making a deal with the Raiders is unlikely, and here we arrive at the crucial point of this entire conversation, Broncos country. Sean Payton was asked about the trade deadline when he was in London last week, and his answer was interesting. He didn't rule out moves, but also didn't show urgency. Payton said they always pay attention to what they might be looking for, that they have time to evaluate, but that he wasn't thinking about it at that moment. Typical of an experienced coach, keeping his cards close to his chest, not revealing strategies or intentions to the rest of the league. But let's read between the lines. When a coach says he's not thinking about it now, it usually means internal conversations are happening, evaluations are being made, but nothing is close to materializing. Payton didn't completely close the door, which means if a really good opportunity appears, he might pull the trigger. The big question is, where is the team's biggest need right now? Hey, Denver Broncos family. If you're enjoying this deep analysis and want to stay on top of everything happening with our team, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notification bells, and leave that like. Every day there's fresh content about Broncos country here. Now come back with me because there's still a lot to discuss. The position that most urgently needs attention wasn't even mentioned on this list of possible targets, and that's worrying. We're talking about left guard people. Ben Powers went down injured last week against the Eagles, and that exposed a huge vulnerability in the offensive line. Matt Peart came in as a replacement, and it was a disaster against the Jets. He simply couldn't hold the pressure, was dominated in pass protection, had difficulties in the run game, and it was clear he wasn't ready to take on that role. And to make it worse, Peart also got hurt and was placed on injured reserve. Now the team is juggling the roster, promoting players from the practice squad, reorganizing the line, trying to find a solution that works. And here's the problem. The offensive line is the foundation of everything on offense. It doesn't matter how talented Bo Nix is if he's running for his life every snap. It doesn't matter how good our running game is if we can't open holes. And protecting a rookie quarterback is fundamental to his development. None of the 7 names mentioned as possible targets addresses this need. Mark Andrews, David Njoku, Chigoziem Okonkwo are tight ends. Demario Davis, Jordan Brooks, Jamal Adams are linebackers. Jakobi Meyers is a wide receiver. But no offensive guard appeared on the list. This raises 2 possibilities. Either the front office believes they can solve it internally with pieces they already have on the roster, or there simply aren't quality guards available, in the trade market at this time. Both situations are concerning. Solving internally means trusting players who weren't prepared to be starters, at least not yet. It means asking practice squad guys to take a giant leap in production and consistency overnight. Can it work? Sure, sometimes a surprise emerges. But counting on that when you're 4-2 really competing is a huge risk, and if there are no guards available, well, then we're in the hands of fate, hoping that whoever's on the roster can handle the job and that Powers comes back as quickly as possible. But going back to the names mentioned, let's do a reality check here. Which of these 7 players actually makes sense for Denver right now? Demario Davis would only make sense if he comes for a 7th-round pick or something like that. The connection with Peyton is real. He knows the system. It would be plug and play. But age is too much of a factor, and with Greenlaw coming back, it doesn't justify significant investment. Mark Andrews would be incredible, but the Ravens are competing too. Why would they trade one of the best tight ends in the league? And even if they were willing, the cost would be prohibitive. Multiple draft picks, probably. With Ingram finally producing, it doesn't seem like the best use of resources. David Njoku, similar to Andrews, but maybe more accessible. The Browns are in a complicated situation. They might be willing to listen to offers. But again, with Ingram finding chemistry with Bo Nix, interrupting that could do more harm than good. Jacoby Myers would be a great fit for the offense, would bring that third-down reliability that always helps. But the Raiders will never trade with us. Forget about it. Jordan Brooks, young, productive, would be a good addition to the linebacker corps. But the Dolphins will ask for a lot, and with Greenlaw coming back, it doesn't seem like a priority. Chigoziem Okonkwo, young, interesting development, but doesn't solve any urgent problem we have. Jamal Adams, past his prime, he's with the Raiders and doesn't make sense at all. So looking coldly at this list, none of these moves seem likely or even necessary at this time, except if an incredible opportunity falls into the front office's lap. Like if the Saints call offering Davis for a 6th-round pick, you answer the phone and make the deal. But realistic scenarios? Hard to see it happening. The real question is whether the team will actively look for solutions for the offensive line. Because that is the glaring need. An experienced guard who can come in and immediately stabilize that left side would be worth much more than any of these 7 mentioned options. And there's another factor that can't be ignored: the development of the current team. When you make trades in the middle of the season, you're messing with locker room chemistry, you're changing dynamics that took 6 weeks to build. Sometimes it works perfectly. The new player fits in like he was always there. Other times, it creates more problems than solutions. This roster is playing together. The defense is connected, communicating well, executing Vance Joseph's game plan to perfection. The offense is improving every week. Bo Nix is growing. Connections are being established. Is it worth risking that chemistry for a piece that may or may not make a difference? Sean Payton knows this. He's seen it all in decades as a head coach. He knows when to pull the trigger and when to be patient. And from the tone of his response, it seems the philosophy right now is to trust the process. Trust the players in the locker room and only make moves if something really special appears. There's also the question of cost. Draft picks are valuable currency, especially for a team that's building long-term sustainability. Every 2nd, 3rd, 4th-round pick represents a young, cheap player who can develop and contribute for years. Trading those picks for veterans who will give you 1, maybe 2 seasons max needs to be calculated carefully. And to looking at the future, the cap space, the roster being built, it's clear the plan is sustainability, not short-term solutions at any cost. That said, Broncos country, if I had to make a bet, I'd say we'll reach November 4th without major moves. Maybe a small adjustment, a trade of late picks for a depth player at some specific position. But a blockbuster trade? A big name arriving? I don't see it happening unless some unexpected turnaround happens in the next few weeks. Like, if Greenlaw comes back and immediately gets hurt again, then it would make sense to hit the panic button and go after a linebacker. If Ingram goes down injured, then tight end becomes maximum priority. If the situation on the offensive line deteriorates even more, then any available guard enters the radar. But assuming things continue as they are, that the team maintains its level of play, that injuries don't pile up, the tendency is to keep the roster and trust internal development. And honestly, it might be the right decision. This team is exceeding expectations. Nobody thought we'd be 4-2 at this point. The defense is among the best in the league. Bo Nix is showing flashes of why he was drafted. The running game is working. Why mess with what's working? Why risk the chemistry for a piece that might not fit? Of course, there's always that fear of looking back at the end of the season and thinking, what if we had made that trade? What if we had brought in that player? But regret can come from both sides. You can also make a wrong trade and think, why did we give away those draft picks? Why didn't we trust the roster? The job of George Paton and Sean Payton is to balance these questions, weigh the pros and cons, and make the decision they believe is best for the team in the short and long term. In the coming days and weeks, family will keep an eye on any rumors, any conversations that emerge. The entire league will be busy, names will be thrown around everywhere, speculation will dominate discussions, and whenever something relevant appears involving Denver, you'll know about it here first. The deadline is approaching. November 4th is right there, and between now and then, a lot can happen. A team that's in first place could start collapsing and decide to sell pieces. A player could force a trade. An unexpected injury could completely change a franchise's strategy, and Denver will be watching everything, evaluating every opportunity, ready to act if it makes sense. But based on what we know today, with the available information, it seems we're going to keep the internal focus, develop the players we have, trust the process that's working, and make this season something special with the roster that's already here. So, Broncos country, do you agree with this analysis? Do you think we should go all in for any of these names? Or do you prefer to keep the roster as is and trust the team's natural development? Which of these 7 options do you think would make the most sense if a trade really happened? Demario Davis because of the connection with Peyton, one of the tight ends to give Bo Nix more weapons? Or are you like me thinking the real need is an offensive guard who wasn't even mentioned? Drop down in the comments and let's debate, family. I want to know each of your opinions. And don't forget, if you're true Broncos country, leave that like, share with friends who also bleed orange and blue. And stay tuned, because every day there's new content here about our team. The next 3 weeks are going to be intense. The trade deadline, crucial games, Greenlaw's return, Bo Nix's evolution. There's a lot happening, and you can't miss anything. Until the next video, Broncos country, let's go together until the end.